Hereby call this meeting of the Henry County School Board to order. Appreciate you all coming out. First item on the agenda is a discussion of the insurance premiums for FY25. Dr. Blake Lewis.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The first item is a follow-up to a conversation that we had at last month's meeting concerning insurance premiums and the cost to non-employee premiums specifically. So these would be dependents of our current employees. As you all know, we do fully fund our employee insurance premiums every month. That is a savings to them of $723.17. So it is a wonderful incentive and recruitment tool for Henry County Public Schools. However, for those who choose to add a child or multiple children or a spouse or even an entire family, the costs do present a significant challenge. And so we were tasked with reaching out to our insurance provider to see what a 10% reduction in the cost of that monthly premium would be and how that may impact the fund balance as we are a self-insured entity. So the chart that you have there in board docs is from our insurance provider, and the top is what the current cost is, and at the bottom of the chart it shows the contrasting 10% reduction in the monthly premium. So for example, if you are an employee and you add a child, the current rate is $589.24, but we would be looking at a reduction to $530.32. If it was an employee plus multiple children, the current rate is $769.79. That would reduce to $691.91, and you can see so on down the list. You also see in that column where after employee only 1155, that's the total number of employees. And so the employee and child plan has 24, employee and children has 22, the employee and spouse, there are 27 participants, employee and family, there are 10, and then the dual family plan has 19. So we are talking about just about 100 folks who take advantage of our insurance offering and are paying that monthly premium. If you scroll on to the bottom, you'll see that the actual change in premiums would result in a net loss to the fund balance of $92,643.48. Per the advice from our insurance agent consultant, that is a manageable loss to take in terms of doing something to give back to our employees who are choosing to participate with their families in the plan. And he felt that that would be a safe reduction to make at this time, and that we could weigh the impact as we move into future years and possibly offer an additional reduction if we felt that the fund balance was still healthy and that it was a viable option to do so. I do remind you that as a self-insured insurance entity, that we do pay everything from that fund balance. So if we had a major catastrophic claim, it could reach into the millions of dollars. We've been very fortunate to not have major catastrophic claims at this point, but we know those are things we can't predict. So our insurance agent felt that a 10% reduction in premiums at this time was certainly doable. I do not need board approval to do it, but in full transparency, I wanted to bring this to you one additional time for your input and for your questions before we make the decision to move forward.
One thing I do want to mention before we go further, in my haste, I failed to mention we have Mrs. Durden is available via Zoom. She contacted me, Dr. Blake Lewis, Technology, earlier today to inform that she had an appointment that it would be a struggle for her to potentially make it back to be here in person. I would like, if in that it meets one of our eligibility to participate remotely, do we have a motion to allow Mrs. Durden to participate remotely, and she's available, and we can discuss this and of course adopt the budget afterwards. But
So moved.
we have a motion by Mr. Alker. Second by Mr. Gravely. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Adopted unanimously. Thank you. Also want to say, I know that we had this over with the Finance Committee, and also know that you all checked into but it was not advisable based off of the potential impact regarding changes to deductible or
That is
other
correct,
elements of the
sir.
plan. So I just wanted to say thank you all for looking into that and diligence. That was what I expected, but I wanted to at least have it looked at.
Absolutely. Any
Anybody from the
questions?
board? Yep.
Is reducing payment for retirees, is that something we're gonna look into as well? Did you,
I did relay that was an email we
There
received.
was an inquiry made to that effect. Again, just given the size and scope of the number of retirees, it was not advisable at this time.
I will say I know at least from the state level and other, there's various caveats, but there is a retiree health insurance credit for those who work a certain number of years and et cetera, that obviously relative to years of service or what other things, not necessarily as robust as one would hope, but that's a thing we work at the state level and others to hopefully provide to our retirees.
Well, I'd just like to say that, as I stated before, I think, it's a great opportunity for us to use as an incentive for new employees and, of course, retaining our current employees and let them know that, we are concerned, so, based upon our company, what we're gonna lose, I mean, it's well worth it, well worth
Thank
it.
you. Yes, sir. I agree. I agree.
And the thing, in support of you, and I'll note that when I brought this up a few years ago as something to look at, when you look at that number, and this ties very much into the budget we're going to consider to adopt and our request of the Board of Supervisors and others, when you look at if you were providing for your family's insurance on here, some people talk about the salary we have or we're offering. When you consider the degrees or the licenses our folks have to have, what they have to do, and then if they have to pay that number to cover their family, it's hard to do that, period. And that's definitely somewhat beyond our control to other than what we're doing here. But it's definitely something to consider as far as the realities, and then also, our enrollment, size of families, affordability of having children. I mean, all that ties into, can I provide health insurance? Can I provide this and that for these families? So just bringing that up, but I appreciate the time and effort everybody put into this.
Well, thank you all. It is my recommendation that we do move forward with it, and so that is the path I will take. Hearing no concerns from the board, I did just want to be transparent with the board to maintain our working relationship, that this was indeed a direction that you were in agreement with me on. So I will be moving forward with that conversation to reduce that, and we will be entering open enrollment following spring break. So we will be able to publicize these new rates as part of our open enrollment process and maybe provide just a small bit of relief to those families who are choosing our insurance plan. So thank you.
And then the next item is the superintendent's estimate of needs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to ask Dr. Boone, our Assistant Superintendent of Administration and Operations, to join me. He and I will be tag teaming the presentation this evening. So you will see the PowerPoint in your board docs. I will start with, we always go through our vision and mission and core values for Henry County Schools. Our vision, of course, is to inspiring leaders to positively impact our world. And our core values are really at the heart of this budget presentation this evening, in that we strive for excellence and we put students first. And so what you'll see reflected in this budget are efforts and measures that certainly will help us on our path to achieving excellence, and you will see clear evidence that students are first in this budget. So our budgetary priorities, again, are based in our strategic plan. When we look at high-quality instruction, you will see funding in here for curriculum, for instruction, for assessment. You will also see our commitment to high-quality professionals with recruitment and retention with a competitive salary that we are looking to offer through this budget, in addition to maintaining those health benefits that we mentioned earlier. And with professional learning, you'll also see funding here where we are investing in staff to better their performance. With our budgetary priorities of safe and an innovative learning environment, safety, the environment, climate, and technology, you will see these items reflected in our technology request, but also for general updates to our facilities, to our infrastructure, all which ensure that we have a safe and innovative learning environment. And then for our budgetary priority with family and community engagement, you'll see funding that would be indicative of increasing our communication with parents and our stakeholders, as well as continuing to build partnerships. You'll notice some very significant budget adjustments in our FY25 budget. The first one being a one-step increase to all employees on the teacher scale, and making adjustments to that teacher scale, providing a 5% increase with the step. The new teacher scale will now start at $50,103. And so we know that the governor's proposed budget only includes that one-time 1% bonus, and what the Senate and the House are proposing in their various budget ideations is a 3%. And so what we are wanting to do is add an additional 2% so that we can continue to close that salary gap that was identified in the Evergreen Compensation Study from 22-23 here. This would make some headway into closing that gap that exists when we compare our salaries to those surrounding school divisions. So again, just working towards having a strong recruitment and retention base for our staff. Also, as a recommendation from that salary study, the teacher scale has been expanded from a 28-step to 30 steps. And when we look at our classified staff, again, drawing on that Evergreen salary study, expanding that scale from 28 to 30 steps, and also a one-step increase to our classified employees, along with 5% for them as well. Also, some significant budget adjustments, again, drawing on the Evergreen salary study, looking at the salaries of our secretaries, our bookkeepers, our bus mechanics. We are looking at an average increase to those salary scales of 7.5. When we look at that Evergreen salary study, they were some of the most lacking in terms of competitiveness of their salary, some of those even reaching into the double digits of being 20% or more off or behind when compared with the salary of that same type of position in neighboring school divisions. So also including in the budget a 5% increase to annual pay for our contracted and full-time bus drivers and driver's aides, and then a 5% increase for employees that are paid on an open range or administrative scale. So rising cost of goods and services are reflected in our request here. Looking at transportation costs, we know that post-COVID, everything seems to be ticking up. And so we're allocating additional funding here in this category for fuel and parts and additional bus drivers. Increases in the technology category to shore up our infrastructure and be able to sustain our one-to-one technology programs. Increasing the utilities line. We know that Appalachian Power consistently goes up, and we are not sheltered from that. So looking at covering those escalating energy costs. And then we know that the 1% sales tax, while it has been a tremendous assist to us, our latest facility study has shown that we have some major projects coming up that we are going to need to address, and that will need to be outside of the funding that 1% sales tax can provide. So you'll see an increase in that facilities line for building improvement. This chart is offered just as a historical record. I want to just draw your note to the 2010 to 2021 years, where you'll notice that there was no step increase and or minimal percent increase in salaries across the board, whether it be licensed teachers or full-time certified staff, or drivers and aides, administrators. You'll notice there are several years where there were no step increases or no realized increase in salary. And if we go to the next slide, please, you'll see that conversely, starting in 17-18 and moving forward to current, we have made a very concentrated effort to give those step increases along with a sizable percentage increase across the board to all employees. The additional 5% that we are proposing in this year's budget will continue to help us close that gap. And I'm going to ask Dr. Boone to pick up here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As a reference on the screen, you will see the direct aid calculation tool that we received from the Virginia Department of Education. This tool is what we use to determine revenues that we are expected to receive from the state and the shared amount that we are expected from the local government to be responsible for. This information guides us as we plan salaries and other expenditures. On this slide, you'll see that the total amount from the state, once you subtract out grants, it's going to be a little less than the number you see there. It'll be around $72,670,000. But the total local share from the local government that's expected to be contributed is $18,276,000. For our expenditure categories that we use the calculation tool for as we plan for our expenditures, for FY25, you can see that instruction would go up about $4 million to about $67.5 million. The majority of that being salaries. For administration and health, that would increase by about $400,000. Pupil transportation would increase by about $742,000. Operation and maintenance, $462,000. Facilities, we're hoping that we can increase that line by $600,000. Debt services going up by about $134,000. And then technology projected to go up about $500,000. So the total increase to our budget from FY24 to FY25 would be about $6,857,000. So the allocation of these funds by expenditure category, you can see that instruction makes up close to 62% of our budget. Administration makes up about 4.5% of our budget. Pupil transportation and maintenance, about 8%. What I found interesting is if we were able to increase the facilities line by $600,000, that total percentage for that category, our budget would be 1%. Debt services being about 3%, grants at around 10%, technology at 3%.
So to break these numbers down further, approximately $1.3 million in the instructional category increases is salaries for teachers. An additional $235,000 is in the category of assistant principals, and these are two positions that were created from the ESSER budget, and we would like to keep those in place, so we would absorb those two salaries into this year's budget. Another little over $1 million would be for the salary increases for classified and part-time staff. And then you'll see $522,000 there for purchase services. Again, these were some things that were brought in during ESSER, during the COVID years, but they are some services that we feel continue to align to our priorities, so we would want to keep those in place. And actually, some of those are positions. With the category of administration, attendance, and health, and then the transportation, you can see the breakdown here of about $480,000 with salary increases that would be absorbing 2 nursing positions from the ESSER budget, 2 behavioral interventionist positions, and an additional school psychologist and a psychologist intern. $50,000 for contracted positions for STED-related positions. But I do want to highlight for the board that we have been able to reduce this year's budget by about $130,000 due to combining some positions at the central office level. So we made some adjustments when I came in June, and we've continued to make some adjustments, and we realized a savings there of about $130,000. With transportation, those salary increases would cost us about $267,000. And then fuel costs, we're looking at $238,000. With maintenance, facilities, and technology increases, again, the salary increases are listed here. The purchase services and utilities, you can see we're expecting that to be about $350,000. Our facilities, we want to add that $600,000 to what we've had this past year for those projects that aren't covered by that 1%. And then with technology, our lease or rent options on our one-to-one technology is gonna cost about $250,000. And then investing in our infrastructure is another $200,000. So the chart you see here is the new proposed teacher scale. Again, this was made in consultation with Evergreen as part of the compensation study. And you'll see that it has expanded to a 30-step plan, 30 years being the typical length of time that is considered a full career. And you'll see that the years of service are basically aligned with the step. You'll see the salary scale from 23-24, and then the salary scale proposed for 24-25, so that you can see that that is a sizable increase. You'll also see in that final column the number of employees that we have that would be at each of those steps. I want you to pay very close attention to how many of our staff are topping out at the scale, which means that we need to do all that we can to bolster our recruitment process so that as these folks choose to retire from the system, that we are replacing them with younger teachers who are coming out of college. But we have to be strong with our competitive salary, with our competitive benefits to make sure that that happens. And then this is our proposed classified scale. I realize it is a little bit small, but again, it is a 30-step, and again, that was the recommendation of the Evergreen study. And you can see the various classifications across the top. And again, here this is a continuation. We have many categories for classified staff. We did make some adjustments to a few substitute and hourly pay rates. Just again to make sure that we are able to fill those substitute positions. It is very difficult to reach out to a retired teacher and get him or her to commit to multiple days or long-term positions. And so we wanted to make sure that that was a salary that would entice a substitute to come in and do that. We also made an adjustment to the special runs for bus drivers. Not special runs, activity runs, because those are the ones where we have drivers who commit their time after hours to do those long, late night high school athletic events. So we wanted to make sure that there was an hourly rate assigned there that would help us to encourage those drivers to pick up those runs. I'm also going to talk you through the capital improvement plan. I know that these are things that we've talked about extensively over the last several months. But our current projects that are in the works are listed here. We know that the Bassett Phase 7 HVAC, that is one that we are all looking forward to completing. That is being funded from the 1% sales tax. At Laurel Park, their HVAC replacement in various parts of the building is being funded from a budget and a grant, for the facilities budget and the grant. And then the Rich Acres and Stanleytown HVAC replacement and a chiller at Axton, those are ESSER dollars and a combination of some of the 1% funds. Also currently in the works, of course, is the addition of elevators at Campbell Court, Drury Mason, and George Washington Carver. Those are our 3 schools that are multi-level and do not have, currently do not have an elevator access, and so we're funding that from the 1%. The field houses at our 2 high schools, again, from the 1%. And then the inclusive playground, we have that budgeted as a combination of ESSER dollars and the 24 budget. And those projects total a little over $20 million. When we're looking at moving forward, there are several projects that were identified as part of our facility study. And this is just what happens when you have aging buildings. You have to be conscious of replacing roofing and replacing HVAC. Replacing electrical wiring and plumbing and such, because we want our buildings to be welcoming and inviting places for our students. So what we're looking at moving forward in fiscal year after this in 2025, would be several projects. If we can back up one slide, please. The roof replacement at Laurel Park, about $3.3 million. HVAC replacement at FC Middle, $5.9. The HVAC replacement at Sand, $2.2. And then, next slide, please. Switchgear replacements at FC Middle and Laurel Park Middle, 3.2, and then pavement at Stanley County Career Academy, about 1.5. So another $16.2 million there on those capital improvements. And then we're not done yet in projecting. We've got our 2026 projection as well. So looking at some roofing, coating, and replacement at Axton, about $750,000. Pavement at FC and Laurel Park, and then switchgear replacements at both high schools. That's our electrical projects there. Boiler replacements at various schools. And then, of course, if we need to continue to expand our options for students at Career Academy, we would do those on a to-be-determined basis, and also some athletic facility improvements as funding is available. And that's a total of 8.9, or basically $9 million. And so if you go back and add up all those projects that have yet to be started, we're talking a total of $45 million. And so we know that currently out of that 1%, we have expended money for the field houses, the elevators, and the HVAC project at Bassett that is leaving us about $1.8 million in that fund. Now, it does regenerate at about a rate of $450,000 a month. And so over the course of a year, you're going to be coming in somewhere in that $5 to $6 million range. But our needs right now are about $45 million, which is why we're asking for an increase in that line item to be able to start tackling some of these projects as they come up. We want to make sure that we don't let a roof go without repair, because we know that once it starts leaking, then we have other problems, right? So that is the impetus for the increase in that line with the facilities. Dr. Bing.
So in order to make all those things happen, you have to have revenue that comes in. As we're looking at our revenue for FY25 from the state government, again, we're expecting $2.2 million. In order to achieve the total amount that we'll need for the expenditures that we've reviewed, we would need a total of $6,857,000. So that would leave a request from the local government of $4,636,000. In FY24, the local government funded us at $19,351,000. So for FY25, we're asking for $23,987,000. A breakdown of how these funds come in from the state for our standards of quality, we would be looking at an $8.4 million increase from the state. For our incentive programs, we would be looking at a decrease of about $9.5 million. That decrease being the all-in funding that we're receiving for FY24 going through 26. We've pulled that out like a grant. And in FY24, we also had the 7% compensation funding that was in that incentive program. So that's why that's such a decrease in that category. In our categorical programs, that would be, for example, our homebound services. And then in our lottery funded programs, we see a decrease there. But again, overall, a $2.2 million increase from the state. For the local funding, the state says that the local government is responsible for standards of quality. It's a $3 million increase on the local side. For the incentive programs, it would be $1 million less. That's with the projected Governor Youngkin's 1% bonus. Lottery funds, about $100,000 less. And local leeway, what we would need is $5,711,000, which would be about $2.6 million more in the local leeway or discretionary funds that the local government could possibly choose to give us from last year. So again, the total from FY24 from local government was $19.3 million. For FY25, we're asking for $23,987,000. So as a comparison of local revenue that's come in from the past, about past 10 years, you can see in 2016, the local leeway funding was about $4.8 million, which increased going into FY20 to about $6.6 million. The local effort at that time in 2016 was $16.9 million, but you saw that also increase as you're getting around FY20. The percentage of the local leeway that the local government was choosing to give at that time, if you look at 17 and 18, was around 30%, going into 34, 35%. But as you can see, starting around FY '21, those numbers declined. In FY '23, our local leeway funding went from $5 million down to $3 million. So we went from 26% local leeway percentage they could choose to give to 16%. And then the year we're in now, that was down to 15%. So you can see that we went from around 35% a few years back down to 15% for that local share. So for FY '25, the required local effort that the state government says that local government is responsible for is $18,276,000. The local leeway funding that we're asking for is $5,711,000, making the total local effort $23,987,000, putting us at about 23.8% as part of the local leeway that they could possibly be able to choose to give us, which would put us back to close to where we were around 2022. So this kind of just breaks down a comparison, looking at FY '21 to what we're asking for in FY '25. The amount over the local share, or the amount over what the state government said the local government's required to give in FY '21 was $5.7 million. You can see how that declined in FY '22. Then in FY '23, that went down to $3 million. So for FY '25, with our expected expenditures, that would put us back to where we were in FY '21. You can also see the difference in the previous year's required local share. You can see in FY '23, there was about a $2 million decrease from the local government, and the years prior to that, about 1.5, if you combine those. So for FY '25, the difference would be $2.7 million there. Just some meetings that are coming up. The local Board of Supervisors meeting on April 2nd, the work session on April 4th, and then public hearings on April 14th.
So at this time, we would open the floor for any questions from board members. I do want to maybe prompt your thinking on one item. I know that we have had some discussion around a categorical budget versus a lump sum budget. So if we were wanting to flip it, excuse me, if you were wanting us to proceed in that direction, Dr. Boone and myself would need to know the pleasure of the board, and no decision is needed this evening, but we can certainly kind of get a sense this evening and then add this to our April board meeting agenda if you would like to have it there for discussion. But that would be my question maybe to you all, but what questions do you have for us?
I have, and it may be easier for you to answer if you pull the slide back up.
Okay.
It may be slide 5-ish. It's titled Significant Budget Adjustments FY '25.
Let's only go back to
And I think because there's 540 off-step teachers, we've had some propose.
That's the total number of teachers.
Okay, gotcha. Well, there's a lot that are off-step, I think, because I know when we were upstairs, there was a lot that were going to be set to retire in the coming years. There's been some questions around, and I'm starting to get a little confused. If you can just clarify, so I maybe save you a lot of phone calls.
No, that's fine. So you're asking about step 28?
Well, yeah, when it says that, and then it says, provide a one-step increase to all employees on the classified scale and increase classified scale by 5%. But a $2,500 stipend is not 5% of $71,801. So is that an adjusted, stipend that they're getting? Because
Okay, you're referring to the teacher scale?
yeah, well,
We have some teachers who are making $71,800 right now, and so those teachers are all step. That's the very top of our scale. Even the new scale is around 71,300, so they're about 500 over that. So those teachers who are making that salary would receive a $2,500 stipend, which would be about a 3.5% increase for those individuals.
so they get gypped. They don't get the 5% that everybody else does?
I wouldn't call it being gypped. This is fiscal management based upon recommendations of the Evergreen study. It is very typical and best practice to have a scale representing the typical 30 years, which is considered a full career. This enables us to maximize the funding down the scale so that we can continue to recruit and retain those teachers who are new into mid-career while still recognizing the value of those who have already maxed out the scale. So rather than just stopping them at a max out, we're still offering a $2,500 stipend for any of those over that last step.
I don't agree with that. I think they should get equal what everybody else does. They've been here carrying the school system. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. I think they should get equal what the others do just because they've been here longer.
I appreciate your comment, and we would have to see if that would fit the budget, but currently it would not.
Other questions or comments?
I know from the facilities category, because you made reference, the 600,000, we hope to increase this, so why wouldn't we, what's gonna prevent us from increasing that line item?
It would be contingent upon the funding that is made available to us from the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
So if we had to choose between paying people or putting money into our facilities line, we would certainly choose to pay people. So
Okay.
this is all really contingent upon the funding that we receive from the County Board of Supervisors.
And further to the point that you and I and others have made, if you're doing lump sum funding versus categorical funding, and we have to move between different categories, so this is dedicated to facilities maintenance, for example. Well, if we're gonna make a move, then we have to go and say, okay, do we approve of that? Then we send it over, then do they approve of it? Then the money comes back, and we're talking months. Now, historically, they have approved all these moves, but it just makes the process slow down. So that would be another factor. It's also why we will probably have multiple versions of this budget aside from the state budget adoption issues.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure by the time the state does their thing, I know we're gonna have to revisit this. So.
Yes. This
So
is
I
the
was just
start.
curious as to why, because you made reference to if we. Okay, I got you.
Additional questions?
So if you're on, Dr. Bean, if you're on step 28, you're looking to move a step for the 5%, right?
Right. It's because it's increasing 30 steps.
Right.
And a lot of people we have all step right now who are on step 28. We have different categories of people who are off step, and some of them making the 71,800. But we have others that don't make that much,
That's right.
and they would fall on step 30. And that would be a 5%.
And I guess just as an FYI too, historically, we've done, when you're at the top of the scale, I know last year we just gave them X amount of dollars, because they were at the top of the scale.
They've already hit the max.
Yeah.
So this is a stipend to, not go, just you're at the max. Here's what we can do based on the money we have.
Some of the surrounding counties max at 15 years.
So the fact that we expand to a 30 is definitely a service to our teachers and our staff to go to 30, yes.
And I do know that one of the adjustments that have happened over time and recommended was kind of more of a linear path of those different steps as opposed to different years get, if you get 10, that's worth more than this step or whatever. So part of this was to make it more equitable, that you don't have some of the problems that you're
Correct.
referring to.
So this new teacher scale does represent about a 1.5% increase between each step, which is very equitable. It's an approximate, I think it's an average 1.5, but most of them are between 1.2 and 1.5 of a step in between.
Because if you looked at the lines from before, it did this,
And I
way
get
much-
you've got to do that, but then you're just going to push them out the door to retire. I mean, if they feel like they're not getting what other people are getting, if they're getting a 5% raise, but then they're not getting a 5% bonus, because eventually those people are going to get maxed out. They put the same years in. I would feel that way in my business if I've been there that long. I've done the dirty work to get there.
Understood. Other questions or comments? And how about Mrs. Durden?
I'm just glad we're not back in the times of the 0 steps and 0
yeah.
increases.
I do like the
Amen.
steps.
Gosh.
Now, I do want to make sure that everyone is aware of the hard work that Dr. Boone has done with this budget, but also the work from our Human Resources Department. Ms. Landon and her staff have really worked to dig into that compensation study from Evergreen and have really worked diligently to put together these scales and the job categories so that we can become much more efficient with how we operate as a school division and to really look at that equity between steps and between the different job categories so that people do know from year to year what they can expect with their salary in terms of a step increase. Anything that comes from the Commonwealth is of course going to be above and beyond what we have built into the steps. You know, we will adjust that with that, whatever that scale from the state is. But I think that I would be remiss if I didn't recognize those folks who have done that work of helping to build all of this as part of this budget. So.
I would like to commend the people who have worked on this, even those from the board and so forth. You know, through the years, there were many times that I never got a step or anything of that sort. I mean, there was never considered a stipend unless you were a coach or anything of that sort. I think we're being very generous in giving these folks that stipend because, yes, they're at the top of the step and so forth, and they worked hard to get there. But we also need to think and thank them for all the time that they put in. And I think this budget is one of the best I've ever seen. So I commend you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that.
I'd even asked Dr. Boone, I was like, are we okay? Because like the surrounding counties, they're cutting major numbers in staff. They're not getting raises, they're not getting steps, they're frozen. I'm thinking, so how are we? And he gave thanks to the local our local funding several years back
Yes.
to be able to provide what we're getting now because you know, our surrounding counties aren't getting anything at this point in time.
That is correct. I will also say you see a lot in the news with schools that are closing in Bedford and in Franklin and Lynchburg, and that is, I think, a testament to how we were very strategic with our ESSER funding, and we did not lump a lot of positions into that ESSER funding. We used it for projects. I know a lot of our HVAC projects and that type of work was funded largely through the ESSER dollars rather than creating positions for people. We do have a few, I think less than 5 positions that we're rolling over from that ESSER budget into our continuing budget here. But some of those systems, I think, have been caught up in how do we continue to fund all of these positions that were in our ESSER budget, and that ESSER money is going away in September.
And they're cutting those
So I
positions.
commend the staff here for making sure that we were not caught up in that.
We've been fortunate too that our student populations is held pretty strong.
And I believe that 44% of our teachers do have a master's degree, and I know it's $2,100 for a master's degree. It's been that way for years and years. I would say at least back to the year 2000. Where does this $2,100 come play in on this here?
Well, it's factored in our budget, that amount.
Okay.
It is part of that line for salaries. It's built into it. And I do think, Mr. Hardy, I appreciate you pointing that out, because as you all know, I relocated from North Carolina, and the state of North Carolina did away with recognizing master's and advanced degrees. And so those were no longer considered grounds for an extra stipend. So if you had made it in before that decision was made, they kept it in place. But anyone earning a master's degree or advanced degree after that, it's not part of your compensation package. So again, I think that's another bonus for Henry County, that we recognize that value of earning an advanced degree, and that we do provide compensation to our staff for that.
And what did you say last time, like, our insurance is like $8,500, like staff
Sure.
insurance? So really, you could add that to these salaries, and,
You could,
Yeah.
you could, $753 a month, I think, is our contribution, so yeah, about $8,600 that we are saving a teacher by providing their health benefits.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get this on the floor so we can move, that we accept everyone's work in the budget and we adopt it.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the budget as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Gravely. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Mrs. Durden's vote? Okay. Then it is unanimously adopted. Thank you very much. I'm trying to think, do we have anything else on the agenda? I do not recall. Okay. I just want to say quickly how much I also appreciate everyone's time and effort put into this. Thank you to each of the board members as well. And the one comment, to two actually, I will say, and I made this somewhat earlier, you know, the state budget is expected to carry on through April or May, so we will be revisiting this, particularly when those are proceeded with. I fully expect something closer to the House Senate version than 3% salary increases and other funding for us, which should be quite supportive. So this is providing those based on the governor's current budget, which does not provide for any increase for the teachers. So I'm very happy and supportive of the budget that we have here. Thank everyone for their efforts on that. The other item I would point out is, you know, we are following the Evergreen compensation study efforts that were made there. I would note that the Board of Supervisors, their administration, made changes last year to adopt elements of this. We did not have the funding at that time provided to address that, so that's one reason this is a little more robust of a request than normal. This is to try to be equitable to our folks, including their folks as well. So just wanted to highlight that request as well. So while we have adopted, there's a lot more work to do. We'll have a lot more to do for our folks, and to go get this money, whether that be at the local, the state, or whatever other levels we need to get our folks the money that they need and they deserve. So just wanted to say that real quick. And if there is no other business or anything else to say at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn by Mrs. Whitlow.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hardy. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Is Mrs. Durden in agreement? Mrs. Miller? Okay, we are adjourned.